us. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for joining on this workshop on Posh Awareness, an awareness workshop on prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. There are a lot of myths and little clarity surrounding the definition of sexual harassment for many of us. We've heard it a lot from the media. Lots of movements such as Me Too have made us aware about the kind of sexual harassment cases that have been happening pan-India and globally. I too went through something like this when I started my corporate career in 2009. And I thought I was a fresher, ready to take on the world. At least that's what I thought. But I had no knowledge about my safety at workplace. No training was even provided, neither in my college time or during the first few years of my corporate life. But times now have changed. Many organizations, including MNCs, are now making efforts to enhance awareness about sensitizing
their... Second, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm receiving a number of messages saying there's no sound. Can everyone hear?
Can everybody hear me?
I can, but yes, I've been reading messages that people can't hear. So maybe you guys need to log in again. Those of you who can't hear possibly can log in again. Might be some problem with your system because we're all connected and we can hear. Sorry, Sneha, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Sneha.
Yeah, I hope if majority of us can hear, then I think there's a network personal issue, I think. So, yeah. So, Posh awareness is extremely essential. And I've gone through it myself. And I have seen that no training was provided in the first few years of my corporate life as well. Many organizations, however, now have started bringing in awareness, sensitizing their employees on Posh. Times have changed. But generally, the kind of topic the Posh is, it's a topic which is perfect for young college students like you to be aware of your personal safety. Because personal safety is a very, very integral part of your personal growth. This is a very important awareness workshop which all colleges should bring about for their students. And I just don't mean for women, but also for men. Because when we fight for something, we need to fight it together. Both parties should be aware of the limitations, the definitions, and the legal aspects surrounding the sexual harassment. We need a world where women don't get sexually harassed. It's as simple as that. Which is why, in commemoration of the global 16 days campaign against gender-based violence, FICCI FLO has organized this awareness workshop on Posh for college students. For today's workshop, we have Ms. Hima Bisht, who will be enlightening all of us about this very topic, Posh, prevention of sexual harassment, especially at workplace. Hima currently heads training and workforce development at MidCat Advisory Services. She has over 20 years of experience conducting training programs for women's safety awareness, women's empowerment, communication skills, and soft skills training program for the government as well. She has successfully spearheaded and extensively conducted women's safety awareness training programs for various corporate entities as well. ICICI Bank, JP Morgan, Bloomberg, Citibank, HSBC, Goldman Sachs, Cape Gemini, and many more, including NGOs in Pune and Mumbai. I extend my warm welcome to Ms. Hima for taking a valuable time out to spend with us and making our time today extremely meaningful. But before we begin this workshop, I would take the pleasure of inviting Dr. Aarti Gupta, Chairperson FLO Kanpur, who's also the National Initiative Head of today's event. Aarti.
Thank you, Sneha. A very good afternoon, everyone. I extend a very warm welcome to all the college students joining us from different cities of India. A very warm welcome to Hima and a big thank you to you for agreeing to conduct this workshop for us. I wanted to give a little bit of brief to all the students attending today about what FLO is. FICCI FLO was established in 1983 as a division of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, which is the apex body of industry and commerce in India. As an all India organization for women, FLO has 17 chapters pan-India. Under the leadership of our national president, Mrs. Jahnabi Phookan, FLO aims to be a facilitator in the economic empowerment of the women of this country. And we feel that the only way to do that is to create sustainable livelihood options. We at FLO aim to connect women with the relevant stakeholders from training in specific verticals for enhancing their livelihood opportunities, increasing their self-awareness as equal partners in the nation's growth, and working towards their economic empowerment. However, as more and more women join the workforce, there has been a rise in the number of issues that affect the integrity of women and also have an impact on the physical, mental, as well as social well-being of them. One cannot deny that in its different forms, sexual harassment is still a part of workplace, irrespective of the fact that it is reported or not. And it has to be given a serious thought, and people's participation should be encouraged to make every workplace safer and healthier. Nearly 88% of female workforce in India in the IT, the BPO and the KPO companies have reported having been suffered some form of workplace sexual harassment during the course of their work. This was a survey conducted by Transforming India, which is a non-government organization. The report says that about 50% women have been subjected to abusive language, to physical contact, or being sought for sexual favors from. As many as 47% employees did not know where to report, while 91% did not report for fear of being victimized. These statistics are scary. And the most concerned part is the lack of awareness amongst us women employees on what to do in case something like this happens to us. The purpose of today's workshop is to create an awareness amongst all of you individuals who will soon be joining the workforce. I hope you benefit from this and leave today's session as a more empowered individual. Before we begin the session, on behalf of FICCI FLO and National President Jahnabi Phookan, I would like to present a small memento to Ms. Hima Bisht for her fabulous work. Can I request the IT team to please share the memento? Thank you, Hima, for this wonderful, agreeing to do this wonderful session for all the students attending today. I would like to invite you to now take on the stage and begin the session.
Thanks very much, Aarti and Sneha, both of you. It's actually a real pleasure for me to be able to, firstly, for you to invite me to this forum. FICCI FLO is doing a fantastic job. And I'm really, really happy to be a part of this session today. I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to be able to do something like this for, the audience that we have here today. I work for a risk consultancy, and we do training sessions on all kinds of things. Risk, security, consultancy, these are our strengths. And security of women and security at the workplace is also very, very important for us. So we have with us an audience today that is at the threshold of their working career. And so, like Sneha rightly said, it's very important for you to really understand how things at the workplace are going to be, because sometimes what works on a college campus, being light and funny and joking around and forwarding WhatsApp messages, because these days WhatsApp and social media and the kind of messages and the kind of memes that are doing the rounds here, without even thinking, you just forward it to your friends. Or when you're on campus, you tease your friends, you make comments on all sorts of things, whether it's their appearance, whether it's sexual innuendo, which nowadays people take it very casually, using I don't know whether to call it foul language or whether to use, whether it's modern to use language like that. And it's perfectly fine and in place in a campus. But when you're at the workplace, all of these things take on a different connotation. So I'm really glad that right at the beginning, I'm able to address all of this for you and make you understand how to conduct yourself at a workplace, because that's going to make all the difference in your career, and sometimes it can make or break your career, right? So thanks for giving me this opportunity. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. We have a very short time, we have an hour, so I just have just a few ground rules. If you have any questions, like Aarti said, you can put them in the chat box or park them for the end of the session. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Other than that, all of you connect with me offline as well. My number and email ID is available with the organizers, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. All right. So with that being said, I'm ready to begin. Just give me a second to share my screen. So here we are. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. And can you hear me clearly? These days you can't start a Zoom session without these two standard questions, which is, can you see me? Can you hear me? And can you see my presentation? Okay. So with that out of the way, we're ready to begin. So essentially, what is prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace? The POSH law. Let me start by three things: the Constitution of India, the Vishakha guidelines, and the POSH act that came about in 2013. Now, essentially what the Constitution of India said, and I'm going to only deal with the articles that are relevant to sexual harassment. And the first of the articles was Article 14 and 15, which talks about equality before law. What does that mean? You cannot discriminate against anybody on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth, right? And Article 21 that talks about the right to live with human dignity free from exploitation. Why am I discussing these articles which are part of the Constitution? Especially this aspect of Article 21, where we talk about, the right to live with human dignity free from exploitation, becomes important in the context of the workplace, right? Because exploitation at the workplace, especially with reference to sexual harassment, is quite common. And you have to understand what sexual harassment means, how it manifests itself at the workplace, what are the signs to look out for, and if it happens, how do you deal with it, right? Now, let's talk about what the Vishakha guidelines were. I'm going to take you back a little bit to 1992 and very quickly run you through what the Vishakha guidelines are and what led to POSH as an act being promulgated by the legal system in India. Because POSH is something that's very specific to India, it's gender neutral, and it's been a law that's been created specifically for India. Against gender discrimination and CEDAW, there are laws by the UN, globally speaking, and all of it. The POSH is very specific to us. And what was the history and what led to this? Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to tell you a very interesting story about the Vishakha guidelines. In 1992, there was a Dalit woman in Rajasthan who was working for the government of India. She was working for the Women Development Program, or the WDP, in Rajasthan, which fought for rights for women and talked about, tried to abolish or let's say inform people about child marriages, female infanticide, dowry, and all of that. And this girl, or this lady, young lady, Bhavri Devi, had been hired by the Indian government in Rajasthan to work as what was known then as a Sathin, right? And she worked to bring about, to kill ignorance and to bring about knowledge and awareness against child marriage, the dowry system, and all of this. Now, while she was doing this, she tried to stop a Gujjar family from marrying off their 9-month-old daughter. And they were really insulted that a Dalit woman, considered a low caste, had the audacity to try and come and stop like what was considered a high caste at that time from doing what they wanted to do. All right. And they decided that the punishment, the correct punishment for her was gang rape. And so she was raped by a group of people from that Gujjar community, All right. We tried to stop this child marriage. Now, this became a big hue and cry, and a lot of NGOs took up this cause of Bhavri Devi. And Vishakha was one of those NGOs that took this case to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court took this. What happened at that point of time was that the state washed their hands off and they said that she was raped in a field in Rajasthan, not in our office over here. We are not responsible for this, right? And that is why these NGOs created such a hue and cry. And then they took this, filed a court case, this went to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court acknowledged that, look up at the screen, one, sexual harassment is a human rights violation. It is a violation of the constitutionally guaranteed fundamental rights, which was what I talked about earlier, Article 14 and 15 and Article 21. I'm also going to refer to the Me Too movement, which Sneha also referred to, and which you'll probably be able to connect to. And I'm going to connect the two, Me Too and Posh, and tell you what the differences are, how Posh is relevant or valid at the workplace, how it translates to the IPC or the FIRs that can be lodged at a police station, so you understand what the difference is and what was the difference and how Me Too and Posh are somewhat related but not completely related. Okay, we're going to get to that in a moment. But anyway, to get back to this, so the Supreme Court acknowledged that sexual harassment is a human rights violation, that it's a violation of constitutionally guaranteed fundamental rights, especially the two articles that I referred to, the right to equality and the right to live with dignity. It also talked about a right to a safe environment and the right to practice any profession, trade, occupation, or business, which is essentially your workplace. That workplace can be anything. You can be a domestic worker, a maid in the house, you can be working anywhere. All right. And then they said that there was a need because there was a vacuum. For instance, like I said in Bhavri Devi case, though she was working for the government, the state said we can't do anything about this, which was really a pity because what had happened to her had happened because of the work that she was doing, because of the work that she was told to do by the state government, right? Are you with me, everyone? So that is when the Supreme Court created a set of guidelines. Now, please understand that this was not a law. This was a set of guidelines that the Supreme Court gave, and they said, okay, henceforth, something like this should not happen again. We have to prioritize safety at the workplace, especially for women. So this is a very culture-related guidelines, set of guidelines that came into place because of the atrocities committed against a woman when she was trying to work and make a place for her. This was for herself, for her community, for the betterment of women, for women empowerment, right? That's what she was working for, because she was trying to get rid of female infanticide, of dowry, of child marriages, all of this. And while she was trying to work that something like this had happened, and hence this set of guidelines came into place. They were known as the Vishakha guidelines. All right. And these Vishakha guidelines were a sort of a precursor to the Posh Act that came about much, much later in 2013. But till 2013, the Vishakha guidelines were inviolate and they were considered like a law. Now, so this is what the Vishakha judgment or the Vishakha guidelines were. All right. Now, the first thing that they said was they defined what is sexual harassment. Because I just mentioned earlier that, on a college campus, you say a lot of things in, jokingly, and you're with friends, it's all right. But when you're at a workplace, you might say the same thing that you are talking. Okay, so please stop me if I'm going too fast, all right? I have a lot of things to cover and I'm going to be moving a little briskly. But if I'm moving too fast or if you don't understand anything, raise your hand or put it in the chat. Sneha, I might just request you to monitor the chat box because while I'm presenting, I can't see the chat box. So I may miss out on a couple of things.
I am.
So if anybody thinks, thank you. So if anyone thinks I'm talking too fast or if you don't understand anything that I'm saying, you can ask me now. If I'm not able to answer now, I will take those questions at the end of the session. All right? Okay. So the Vishakha guidelines made a few very standardized definitions. Because in this case, the state government earlier, right, in this Bhavri Devi case in Rajasthan had said, oh, this happened in a field, not our responsibility. She was not in an office. So now what the guidelines said was, okay, we will define a workplace. If she's in a field or if she's in somebody's house because what she had to do was in the village, go from house to house. She had to go to each house and say, okay, dowry nahi hona chahiye, female infanticide nahi karna chahiye, child marriage nahi hona chahiye, right? She had no other place. There was no office that people came to. She had no other means other than to go to each individual house and talk about these things. So what was her workplace? Her workplace was all those homes that she went to, or all those villages that she traveled to, right? So now what the government did was they defined what is sexual harassment. Okay, unwanted physical, verbal, non-verbal conduct. I'm going to come to that in a little bit. I'm going to also define for you what are the various things that can be connotated as sexual harassment. Second thing, and a very, very important thing, was shifting accountability from the individual to the institution. What does that mean? It means that if Bhauri Devi has to go from house to house for a job that the government has done, her safety at that point is not her own responsibility alone. It's the responsibility of the organization that has hired her to do a job. Do you understand how much of a difference that makes? Because now you as a woman, or I know that there are a lot of boys here, and it's very important for you to be here as well, because you may sometimes, without knowing it, indulge in what could be constituted sexual harassment. You might forward a WhatsApp message just because it came to you, you forwarded it to somebody. Maybe you had no malintent, but how that person views it becomes important and can get you into trouble at the workplace. Okay, but to come back to the women, when you start working at an institution, that employer, that organization becomes responsible for all aspects of your safety. Whether you're at the workplace, whether you're traveling to the workplace when the company offers you transport, right? In 2005, there was a rape case of a Hewlett Packard BPO employee in a cab in Bangalore. All right. And that kind of, again, that was a landmark judgment, because like the Bhavi Devi case and which led to the Vishakha guidelines, which led to the Posh Act, this video rape case in Bangalore also set up a whole new set of protocol and processes in place for women when they're traveling to work. So if a company offers you transport, it becomes their responsibility to ensure your safety while you're getting to work as well. We have moved a long way since Sneha's talking about the time when she started working initially, and she also faced issues like that. Now, women's safety is a topmost priority. You know, we attend seminars, international seminars, whether you go to New York, whether you go to London, whether you go to any of these places. We attend seminars on something called duty of care. What is duty of care? Duty of care is the responsibility of an organization towards its employees to show care for your employees and to ensure that your employees are safe. And even with everything that's going on, whether it's COVID, whether it's so many things, the safety of women employees is the topmost priority for any organization. Yeah, sorry, Sneha.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can we just check with everybody? Is everybody here able to hear you well? Because I can hear you and very well, but a lot of people are complaining about it. So please, can
those who can't hear me
on chat that you can hear, please write a yes if you can hear. That will be great.
And if you can't hear, once again, I'll tell you, just log in again, because it's probably something to do with your mic, and also you will have to press on the button that activates your audio. Okay, so when you get onto the Zoom call, you will have an option to activate your video. I request you to do so, because if you don't do that, you may not be able to hear me.
We've got a maximum yes. Right. So please, let's continue. Sorry for that.
All right, wonderful. So to get back to the guidelines, define sexual harassment, shifting accountability from individual to institution. So now organizations and employers became very responsible for the safety. Third, it prioritized prevention of harassment at the workplace, which means at the workplace, the onus on making sure that the employee understood what is sexual harassment, understood what to do in case of a sexual harassment, again lay with the company. So when you join a company has got to make sure that all these things are taken care of. All right. And then the last but not the least was they also had to provide you with a redressal mechanism. If there is a case of sexual harassment, then There has to be a redressal mechanism. There has to be a complaint committee. There has to be a whole committee of people that are dealing with this misdemeanor at the workplace. All right. And if you look up at the screen again, as the last case said, these guidelines were considered law till such time that POSH came into being. Then in 2013 came the POSH law, the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at the Workplace law. The provisions, what were the of this particular law? Let's get into that. Now, this particular law was based on 3 things: prevention, prohibition, and redressal. As I told you, the prevention at the workplace, onus lay on the employers. They had to ensure that each employee understood what is harassment, understood what needs to be done in case of that sexual harassment, and they had to take measures, prevention and prohibition of such cases. Next was the redressal mechanism that they put in. What is the meaning of the redressal mechanism? Essentially, they had what is known as an internal complaints committee, or the ICC, or IC as it's known now, the internal committee. The internal committee is a complaint committee. If something at the workplace goes wrong, if there is a case of sexual harassment, the complainant can go to the IC and lodge a complaint. This IC then deals with that complaint appropriately, and we'll come to that in a moment. As I said earlier, then because of what happened in the Bhavdi Devi case, now the Supreme Court defined everything very clearly. What is who is an employee? Everybody is an employee, whether it's a regular employee, whether it's a temporary or ad hoc employee, whether it's a probationer, whether it's an internee, whether it's an implied employment, whether it's directly or through a contractor, because a lot of companies or the corporate sector hires vendors. Vendors for what? For security guards, for housekeeping staff. So all of those are not direct employees of the organization, right? You have an HR head, or you have all of these are which are involved with business operations. These are the direct employees of an organization. But you also have the other staff. You have the security guards, you have the housekeeping staff, you have the cleaners, domestic staff. All of those are hired by vendors, but they also come under the purview of POSH in that organization, even though they may not be directly hired by the organization. You understand? With or without remuneration, whether it's a voluntary worker who comes to your organization, because now when we talk about for you, when we say employee, who is an employer, right? So you have a lot of voluntary people who work for NGOs who may not be getting a salary, but if they are working for that NGO, they are working for an organization, POSH is applicable to them, right? So the Supreme Court defined first what is an employee. What is an employer? Everybody else that an employee is working for, which could be the management staff of which handles the business operations of a company. It could be the supervisors. It could be the control room. Any person on a committee. For where a person is working at an organization, everybody at the management level or above them becomes an employer, becomes responsible for them. What is a workplace? So any place visited by an employee for work during the course of employment to do his or her duties in this case especially, that becomes a workplace. So if you have to attend an office party and you're at a restaurant for an office party, that restaurant becomes a workplace. If something happens at that restaurant, that can come under POSH. If you go out for a office official dinner and at that party, some guy has a couple of drinks. I've been part of an IC committee that has dealt with a case like this, where this guy had drinks and said something to this girl, and she filed a complaint against him under the POSH. So she sent a complaint to the IC committee, right? So even that restaurant where that official dinner took place becomes defined as a workplace. Here is a list of all the workplaces now, whether it's governmental bodies, hospitals, nursing homes, commercial, vocational, industrial, financial, educational institutes, house, dwelling place or house. Like now domestic workers, maids and servants and all, they also come under POSH. Only thing is, there's a slight difference. I'm going to come to that in a little bit. But your house, sports institutes, training institutes, stadiums, any private or public organization, all of this constitutes a workplace. Now, under this law, first we define what is an employer, what is an employee, what is a workplace. Now we will define what is sexual harassment. how do you define sexual harassment? Any unwelcome behavior, okay, which can include physical contact or advances. It can include a direct demand or request for sexual favors. You'll be surprised at what happens. I'm sure if you were part of the or heard the Me Too movement, which started in 2018, it came a year later to India after it had made the rounds of the globe in US and Europe. You would have heard of the MJ Akbar case, who was the editor of the Times of India, or Alok Nath, who was a very, very famous actor, or Nana Patekar, again a movie star. And there were cases of the Me Too movement. There were some women who filed cases against these people, right? So, and a lot of times they talk about directors or, people in power who directly ask for sexual favors in return for advancement. They say, we'll give you a promotion. So anyway, a sexual harassment, it can be a direct physical contact or advances. It can be a demand for sexual favors. It could be making sexually colored remarks. Like I said, in a college campus, you may say things like, oh, you look so sexy, or, I like what you're wearing. But these things, when you say it at the workplace, you have to be very, very careful. Because it's not, you may say it lightly, but it does not depend on that. It depends on what the person feels when you say things like this. So this is for all the boys and girls who are here. When you make comments, when you listen to somebody at the workplace, things are very different. You have to be very careful. And you may think it's not important, but you'll be surprised at how many careers have been ruined because the boys just didn't take it seriously. You get a WhatsApp these days. And like I said, these days, memes, messages, some of them have double meaning, some of them have, and now there are, like, let's say there's Aarti, Sneha, and me over here. You might send a message to Aarti and she might not take any offense at all. And you might send one to me and I might say, oh, how can you send me a message like this? I don't like it. And I might file a case, with Posh or with the internal committee. So it depends person to person. But you can't take a chance, right? Because legal action can be taken against you. Showing pornography. Now, obviously, directly showing something like this definitely comes under Posh as a case. But even if you're in a room and two guys are showing or watching pornography without showing it to a third woman who's in the room, they're still liable under Posh and a complaint can be filed against them. All right. So be conscious of this. And of course, any other unwelcome physical, verbal, non-verbal conduct of a sexual nature. Now, so if you have to recognize really, because sometimes people don't know what sexual harassment is really. So any behavior that is unwelcome, that makes you feel uncomfortable, that, somebody passes a comment on you, on your clothes, on your physical appearance, which is sexual in nature. But now, sexual harassment is a very subjective experience. I just told you that sending that WhatsApp message or a naughty message, there are, like, I can see on the screen 3 people over here. I can see Aarti, I can see Sneha, and then there's me. All right. Now you may send it to Aarti and she may not say anything about it. It's subjective because it depends on how a person feels about it. 2 different people will feel differently. But if I feel badly about it, I can file a case against you. So there is no standard yes or no for this. It's a very subjective experience. And please look up at the screen again. This is important. It says the next point says, impact, not intent is what matters. So like I said, you may forward a WhatsApp message with no intent. You might have, you might just say, oh, Mila, aage bhej diya. But what was the impact of that message? That is more relevant than what was your intent. You may have had no malintent. You may have meant nothing other than just forwarding, bhed chal mein ek aur WhatsApp message forward kar diya. But what was that impact on me? And more importantly, what do I decide to do about it? If I feel insulted, if I feel that this is not acceptable behavior and I decide to take a stand on it and file a case with the complaint committee, then you can be in trouble. All right. So please understand, there's no point in you then coming up to the committee and saying, I didn't mean it. Doesn't matter. The law is behind the woman who has filed a complaint and who said that I didn't like it. I was insulted. This is of a sexual nature and I don't appreciate it. So you turning around to the committee and saying, but I didn't mean anything. Somebody sent it to me. I forwarded it. Please think before you forward. All right. That is the intent of this workshop, for you to understand what is sexual harassment, what can be constituted as sexual harassment, and your intent has really becomes unimportant in this context, because it is the impact on the person who received that message from you, which is far more important for you also as a person, because it can impact your career. All right. And Last, again, the point that it often occurs within a matrix of power. Now, there were a couple of Me Too, very high profile people who got involved with it. One of them that I talked about was M.J. Akbar, who was the editor of Times of India, right? Now, the person who filed a complaint against him were under him. And this is what we mean by matrix of power, because he was her boss. Now, if she is in a position where that job is important for her, if her family depends on her salary, she might say that let him say what he wants, paisa to mil raha hai mujhe because I have to feed my family at home, right? Then when she does decide to complain, somebody turns around and say, why didn't she say anything before? So she encouraged it. Maybe she said it because she had no choice at that point of time. Now, these things are very ambiguous. When he said, she said, we can't say what was the real truth at that point of time. But I'm putting forward to you certain situations that do arise. And if a woman sometimes might need the job more than anything, if she has a family at home to feed, she might put up with certain behavior or behavioral patterns. And this can happen within a matrix of power where her boss behaves like this with her and she has no option but to keep quiet because she wants the job. Or earlier she had no option. Now there is Posh that supports her, that gives her a legal base on which to, start a series of actions to protect herself. All right. Let me just go to some behavior constitute sexual harassment. Making sexually suggestive remarks, innuendos, comments, jokes, getting into somebody's personal space. I'm sitting here and a colleague comes and stands here, puts his arm around me, puts his face close to mine. It makes me uncomfortable. All of these things can be constituted as sexual harassment. Maintain your distance. Now, social distancing. That's one thing COVID has done. Keep your distance, right? Offensive remarks talking about a person's body. Oh, you're looking fat. Oh, you've lost weight. Oh, you're looking great. You may mean nothing, but let me get back to this. The fourth point that says impact, not intent, is what matters. Doesn't matter whether you meant it or not. If the person that you said it to objects to it, that's it. They have a case. All right. Inappropriate questions, suggestions, remarks about a person's sex life, displaying offensive pictures, that is showing images, SMSs, WhatsApp messages, jokes, pornographic images. All of this is considered as sexual harassment. And even like I said, if you are in a room with another girl who's sitting there not watching what's on your phone, but knows that you are watching pornography or inappropriate images, that also constitutes for a basis to file a complaint. Intimidation, threats, and blackmail around sexual favors, unwelcome social invitations, invite you out for a drink or a party or something like that. You keep saying no and they keep saying come out, come out just for a drink. I mean, one sometimes calls it flirting, but it can be constituted as sexual harassment. All right. So this is for the guys. You have to understand that a no is a no. And sometimes you have to know the person that you're talking to and whether your invitations are being accepted in the manner that you intend or not. All right. Now, abuse of authority or power to threaten a person's job. Like I said in the M.J. Akbar case, she said, well, he was my boss. I couldn't say no to him. And that's why I had to, allow him to behave in a particular way. Sometimes what happens is in power, and you ward off sexual advances, or someone tries to ask you out and you refuse to do so, this results in secondary behavior, which has an underlying kind of implication of sexual harassment. For instance, let's go to this. Insulting, blaming, reprimanding an employee, saying that you didn't do the job correctly, which may damage his or her career, insulting them, excluding them from group activities at the workplace. And this happens. Sometimes this happens. Removing areas of responsibility, sometimes making them do demeaning work. You might ask a woman who, after she turned you down, make a cup of coffee, bring me a cup of coffee, not her job, but she may refuse also. But all the time saying this or running her down is insulting to her. And again, these are underlying sexual harassment behaviors which are secondary to what could have been a primary overture, which was then turned down, right? Repeatedly singling out an employee. Again, once a girl turns down a guy, then he starts singling her out and saying, oh, you're not doing correct, making her do wrong things. setting up meetings when she's not there, so she misses it, not giving her an opportunity to undergo training. She does not get budget, time, all of these things to advance her career. So these are all kind of secondary, tertiary results of an underlying sexual harassment behavior. Okay. So typically at the workplace, sexual harassment is of two types: quid pro quo, which is that you ask for sexual favors, they ask for sexual favors and say, you give me this and I'll give you a promotion. Okay, directly. So it's an implied promise of better treatment or promotion, and or the loss of a job. You don't do this, then you may also lose your job. And the second is creating, like I mentioned earlier, a hostile work environment, which is that because I'm not getting what I want from you, now I'll make it very difficult for you at the workplace. Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's take this as a case study. Sanjay is a supervisor of a unit with 12 people. He wants to take this girl called Radhika out. She turns him down. Once she turns him down, what he does is he stops personal communication with her. He communicates with her through other people. He calls meetings when she's not there. So she doesn't learn of what's going on or what new memos have come out. She may miss a meeting. He starts troubling her, gives her written reprimands when she's not able to attend a meeting because he made sure that she was not there or she didn't know about it. So this is all sexual harassment. And then at the end of it, obviously she starts feeling stressed out at work. She gets headaches. She has to take a lot of leave. She's not given leave. She has to take leave without pay. And that's when then she ends up, she says, okay, now I'm going to file a sexual harassment case. So this happens more often than not. This can happen a lot. So as I said, POSH, when it came out in 2013, was based on three things: prevention and prohibition and redressal. So when we talk about prevention and prohibition, what did they do? They set up committees. Now, any organization has to set up an internal complaints committee or an internal committee if they have a minimum of 10 women employees. Okay. Any company, if they have 10 women employees, it's mandated by the law that they have to have an internal committee. This internal committee becomes very important because if there is a case of sexual harassment at the workplace and your boss is troubling you or something like that, you can go to the internal complaint committee and file a complaint. And the second is the local complaints committee. The local complaints committee is for, in cases, the local complaints committee is headed by the district officer. The internal complaints committee is within a company or an organization. If you're working for a company like ICICI or GSK or any of the corporates, all of them have to have an internal committee. But if you're not working for the corporate sector, if you're a part of the unorganized sector, okay, like for instance, a domestic help, she can go to the local complaints committee, which is headed by the district officer. Otherwise, you have a complaint committee within your organization. A minimum of 10 women, if a company has, they have to have an internal complaints committee. And after going to the internal complaints committee or the internal committee, if the complainant is not happy, she can still go to a police station and file an FIR. All right. So that's how it works. Now, who are the members of the internal complaints committee? The internal complaints committee has to have a senior level woman employee from that company. It has to have 2 other employees, a minimum of, can be more, which who have some experience in social work and some legal knowledge or at least knowledge about POSH. And they have to have an external member from an NGO, which is familiar with sexual harassment cases against of violence against women and harassment against women. But nowadays, what they say is that this talks about 4 members, right? It's advisable to have 5 members, because what happens is that when the case goes to a complaints committee, essentially the complaint committee then decides or gives some recommendation. One is they have to decide, firstly, was there a case of sexual harassment or not, right? And once they decide whether there is or isn't a case of sexual harassment, then they give recommendations. They might also make the the person who was the respondent pay damages to the complainant. All of this is decided by the committee. And sometimes if there are 4 people or there are even numbers, there might be a hung judgment. 2 people might say yes, 2 people might say no. So they suggest these days that you have odd numbers like 5 or 7 or something, so that there is one at least deciding vote in order to take a proper decision. Okay. Now, like I said, the local complaints committee or the LC is a committee that is created not by an organization but by the district officer. And it's for people who are not part of a corporate sector, but who may be in a company which has less than 10 women employees, or they may be part of the unorganized working sector like maids and everything. Now, the local committee, like I said, here applies for organizations less than 10, organizations that don't have an internal committee, cases where the complainant is complaint is against the employer. So it might be a small company with 6 employees, and the employer only is the direct boss. So where do you go? You can go to the district officer or the local complaints committee. And as I said, for cases concerning domestic workers or housemaids and all of that. Now, for redressal, when you file a complaint, what are the things that you need to know? Okay, it's very important, and I'm going to connect it to the Posh cases that also happened. All right. So, sorry. Now, who all can complain? Like I said, anybody who has a complaint can complain. If you feel that there is a case of sexual harassment against you, somebody has behaved inappropriately with you, you can file a complaint. But while filing a complaint, if for some reason you as a direct complainant are not able to complain, not able to file a complaint, who can file a complaint in case of you? If there is a physical incapacity for the complainant, then the complainant's relative, friend, co-worker, somebody from the National Commission for Women, social worker, or anybody who has knowledge of that case can complain. In case of mental incapacity, again, the complainant's relative, friend, a special educator, or the psychiatrist or psychologist, a guardian under who that person with a mental incapacity is involved, or any person who has knowledge of this case. Okay, this kind of thing, like in case of mental incapacity and all, generally would go to the district officer, so to the local committee rather than the internal committee, because clearly in the case of mental incapacity, is not going to be a person at the workplace, right? It could be a person in an NGO or in a home or something like that who has been faced with a situation like that. In case of the complainant's death, or in case the complainant is unable to file a complaint, again, it can be done by any other person who is aware of this situation and can present proof or evidence, because that is also important. In a lot of the Me Too cases, there was no evidence because this thing happened in 2018, and the cases, some of them had happened 20 years before, like the Aloknath and Vinta Nanda case. I'll come to that in a minute, and I'll tell you why. What should the complaint contain? This again becomes very important. If you are going to file a complaint, first, you have to have a date and time. When did this happen? You can't just say, oh, kabhi to hua tha. No, there has to be a date. Like in Vinta Nanda's case, she could not remember the dates. That became crucial for her. Okay. So there has to be a date, there has to be a time, there has to be a respondent's name. You can't just say sexual harassment case against someone. Who? So that person's name is important, and the working relationship between you and that person is important. Because here we are talking about POSH, and POSH is a law which is essentially prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. So the work relation is important. So when you complain, what is important? The date, time, name of the person that you're complaining against, and the working relationship with that person. And it's very important for the complaint to have this. Let me just quickly come to this particular thing. See, Vinta Nanda case, for instance, she did not have the date and month. So that her case just didn't stand a chance. Secondly, now in POSH, there is a timeline, okay, for everything. For instance, if there is a case of sexual harassment, within 90 days or within 3 months, the claim should be registered with the. But beyond 3 months, the IC will not accept the complaint. Within 90 days, once the complaint is made, then within 7 days, just the person who against who the complaint is told that. Okay. After that, within 90 days, the investigation has to be done. Once the investigation is completed by the IC committee, within 10 days, the employer has to be told of the whatever recommendations they have made. And once the recommendations have made and have been told, again within 90 days, an appeal can go back. So this is a very, very strict timeline for POSH. In case of this now, Vinta Nanda had not filed on POSH, right? What she had done is she had filed an FIR at the police station. And in the police station, there is no period of limitation. There is no statute of limitation. That is why she filed an FIR 20 years later. Okay, so the FIR was accepted, but again, in this case, she did not remember the date and month. Okay, secondly, it had happened in her house. So what they said was that there is no, I mean, it happened in her house. It's not like Aloknath could destroy evidence or do anything against the case. So he didn't do anything. So that is why her case fell through. Important was, like I said, there was no date or timing. All right, and that became crucial in this particular Me Too case. So the complaint should have date, time, respondent's name, and working relationship. What can a person who's complaining, if you are a complainant in your company, what can you expect from the internal committee? That they should be the organization, when they make an internal committee, the people who are on that committee have to be trained, because this is the job that needs a certain qualification, it needs a certain understanding of how the law works, of how the investigation or assessment of whether sexual harassment has taken place or not has to be done, right? So you need a trained complaint committee. It's a time-bound process. I just told you, the complaint has to be made within 3 months. If you don't do it within 3 months, that case will not be accepted by Posh. Of course, you can file an FIR in the court of law. All right. Then confidentiality, information confidentiality, and assurance of non-retaliation. You can rest assured that in an organization, if you make a complaint against somebody, they are not going to take revenge on you and say, oh, this one has complained against this senior person. Abhi to, she is not going to do well in the company. No, there will be no retaliation. There will be complete confidentiality of whatever you share. If you need counseling or any kind of emotional support, the company has to provide it for you. And if you want to go on and file an FIR under some IPC section in a court of law or at the police station, for that also your organization can help you. So these are the things that an internal committee is supposed to do when you file a complaint. I'm going to just quickly move faster. We have about 7 minutes more. Okay. Now, during an inquiry, the first thing that happens is, especially if your immediate boss is the one who's been bothering you, the internal committee can shift, either give the woman 3 months of mandatory leave. This is besides the other leave that she gets. Okay, based on her sexual harassment complaint, she can get 3 months leave, or she can be shifted from her that immediate boss who's bothering her and given another role or shifted to another office. Okay, that's mandatory. The internal committee has got to do that. Now, in case when a sexual harassment case is made, one is that you are given the opportunity to reconciliate with the person against whom the case has been made. Okay, so either that reconciliation can be done before the investigation starts, or if that doesn't happen, then the investigation starts. When the inquiry starts, like I said, first is the complaint has to go within 90 days. Once the complaint has been made by the complainant, the person against who the complaint has been made, the IC has to tell him within 7 days of receiving the complaint. When the inquiry starts, it has to be closed within 90 days. Once the inquiry is closed, what they do is, I told you, they make recommendations. First is they'll decide, is there a case of sexual harassment? Then if there is a case of sexual harassment, does that man owe her some compensation? All of these recommendations are made by the IC. Okay. When they make those recommendations, they have to be implemented within 60 days. And once the recommendation is made, if the girl is not happy, the complainant is not happy, she can appeal within 90 days. If she's still not happy with it, she can file an FIR at the police station. So that option remains at all times. And that is not time bound. Because as I mentioned in the Nityananda case, she filed a case after 20 years. Okay, because there is no limitation on time. There is no statute of limitations for that. All right. So that is the difference between filing an FIR in a court of in a police station and Posh at the workplace. I hope everybody is with me and you understand what I'm saying and I'm clear and I'm not moving too fast. All right. Keep stopping me if you need to. As I said, the determination of compensation depending on whether the internal committee.
Yeah. I have 2-3 good questions. Would you like to take it up?
I have just another 5-7 minutes. I can take it up again.
All right. Sure.
Okay. Thank you. So, like I said, the determination of compensation is decided by the internal committee, and it may be decided on the evidence that is placed before them, whether of mental trauma, suffering, emotional distress, loss in career, because like I said, sometimes there is underlying sexual harassment behavior, right? Which is that you don't give opportunity to the girl to progress in her career, training, time, keep her out of meetings, things like that happen. And that can affect her career, it can affect her mental peace, her ability to work at the workplace, all of that. Medical expenses which could be incurred, which could be either because of sexual assault, it could be because of psychological impact and the need to see a psychologist. So all of this is decided by the internal committee. If they decide that the victim should get compensation, how much compensation, based on what is the remuneration that the respondent has, all of these things are decided by the internal complaint committee. And like I said, now basically they say that there should be a minimum of 4 people on the complaint committee, but it's better to have odd numbers so that there is at least one deciding vote. Otherwise, if 2 and 2 people can't decide, then that whole investigation is a waste of time for everybody concerned, right? So, like I said, now prioritizing of women's safety, security at the workplace is so high. It's number one for every company. Everything else is on one side. Employee safety is it's mandatory and it's a priority. Not only is it mandatory, yes, by law, if a company with more than 10 women employees doesn't have an internal committee, okay, if they don't have an IC, they can be fined. They can be fined up to 50,000 rupees, and their license to work can be also, or permit can be revoked. It's that important. All right. So what is an employer responsible for? Not only is he responsible for the safety, he has to ensure, and I said this right in the beginning, that the information about the what is sexual harassment, what does it constitute, who is the ICC, what are the things they can do, all of this the employer has to make sure that every employee understands. They have to run him through a orientation on what POSH is and what this is. It has to be put up in visible places in a big organization. They put up these notices everywhere, and it's mandatory to do so, right? What are the penal consequences of indulging in sexual harassment? What is the composition of the ICC? What is the grievance mechanism available? What is the redressal mechanism available? They have to organize workshops like I'm conducting right now, and a lot of companies ask us to conduct these workshops for them, just to make sure that everybody understands. And again, this is mandated by law. You have got to do it. It's very important that whenever all this is happening, an employer is responsible for that employee throughout the inquiry. They have to assist her, they have to help her, they have to treat this misconduct seriously. They have to, if she wants to file a police complaint, the company has to help her in order to be able to do that. They have to initiate that action under the IPC. There are sections 354 A, B, C, and D, which it's also known as the Nirbhaya Act, okay, which particularly deals with this. So this is not a separate act. This is in addition to the POSH. It's supposed to support POSH. And like I said, if you don't get justice by the IC, within the committee, you can file an FIR under IPC section 354 A, B, C, and D, okay, at a police police station. But the vice versa is not true, because if you have filed, like Vintananda filed, or let's say another woman after 20 years files a FIR in police at a police station for a case that happened 20 years ago, it doesn't automatically translate under POSH, for the simple reason that POSH is time bound, right? It is time bound. So unless you do or make those complaints within that time period or that timeline, it is not applicable. Whereas an FIR in a police station there is no time limit on it. Okay, so you don't have to worry if you can't do it as per POSH. POSH, of course, is very specific for the workplace. And then, like I told you, the Vishakha guidelines and POSH came into being specifically to protect women at the workplace. Okay, because our culture and the way things worked in our country, this law came out. So it's not gender neutral. This law is very gender specific. So there are some lacunae in it. One is that men can't file under POSH. But don't worry, because it does not mean that men don't get justice. You can file under the work ethics law at the workplace. It's like the IPC section. There is an IPC section for rape, there is one for robbery, there is one for dacoity. So what applies for rape, the same IPC section doesn't apply for dacoity. So same way POSH applies for women. For men, there is another recourse that they can take. So nothing to really worry about, right? So the employer is responsible to help that employee through the whole process, initiate a FIR in the police station if required, and also they have to support reports, send reports, total reports of the sexual harassment cases in the organization and how they would have been dealt with to the district officer. So this list has to go to the district officer. I mentioned earlier there are two complaint committees. One is the internal committee, which is it's called internal because it's within an organization, and the local committee, local complaints committee, is something that is headed by the district officer. But the internal committee has to send a list of all their complaints and all their sexual harassment cases. They have to document it and send all of this to the district officer as well. So it's taken very seriously. As I said, there is a penalty. An employer can be subjected up to 50,000 rupees for not having an internal complaints committee and to do everything that is mandated by the law. Like I said, the prohibition, prevention, dissemination of knowledge, making sure that every employee understands what is POSH, how it works, and all of that. That onus, that responsibility lies with the employer. Agar unhone ye nahi kiya, then unko they have a fine that they have to pay up to 50,000. If they are repeat offenders, then that penalty goes higher and higher, and then it can be anything depending on what is mandated by the law for the same offense. Okay, and most importantly, their work permit can be withdrawn by the government. So it's a very serious offense, and everybody takes it very seriously. Here are some of the IPC sections, like I said, that deal with sexual harassment. Now, one is section 509, which is basically for e-teasing. So this supports e-teasing. Okay, anything, word, gesture, sound, singing a song to a woman, all of that comes under section 509. It's a cognizable offense. A cognizable offense is an offense which means that a police officer can arrest anybody even without a warrant. And generally, a cognizable offense is a serious offense. So this is taken very, very seriously. Like I said, for POSH, section 354 A, B, C, D, if under POSH you are not satisfied with the justice that is meted out by the internal committee, you can file an FIR in court, and all of this comes under like section 354 A, B, C, D. And this is also known as a Nirbhaya Act. It's an addition to the, just in support of POSH. And in this case, actually, when you file an FIR, then there is no definition of employer, workplace, work, employee, all of that, because that comes only under POSH. This is not for filing an FIR. So you don't have to worry about all of these things. But like I said, the vice versa is not applicable. This was one of the cases. The other Me Too case was the Nana Patekar case, if you're aware of, where Tanushree Datta was an actress who filed a case against him for sexual harassment. One difference in this case was in Vinta Nanda's case, she had done nothing. Tanushree in 2008 had filed a case with the CINTA, that's the Cine and Television Artists Association, saying that there was a case of this. She also had two witnesses who said that when she complained, they were Nana Patekar's fans, and they came and broke her car and broke the glass and threw stones on her and all of that. There was a journalist called Janice Sequeira, and there was another called Shiny Shetty, and both of them were witnesses to this. So there is a little bit of difference in her case. She had witnesses, she had filed an FIR earlier in the police station. And when in 2018, she filed as per the Me Too Act, this FIR came into the picture and the police said, yes, even at this point of time, even though CINTA didn't do anything, which CINTA could have, as they could have taken action against one of their own and they didn't. But that FIR had been filed, I don't know why it didn't materialize into any form of legal action. But they said, yes, that she had filed. And then in 2018, when she did it again, she's also, if you look at the last line, filed a complaint with the district officer. Okay. So she did everything legally possible in the right way. But still, I think this case sort of fell through the cracks. One very serious case that happened was also, I don't know if you're aware of, because this was some time back, Tarun Tejpal of Tehelka. This happened in 2009, I think, or 2012, I don't know, just before the POSH Act, where a journalist who worked under him, a young girl, said that, she complained against sexual harassment by him, and he went to jail. He's still fighting the case. He was still in jail in Goa. He went on, got out on bail and everything. So, so this is where we are with POSH. And I hope that you understand the difference between when you file an FIR under IPC sections at the police station and what POSH at the workplace really means and how it impacts you. Okay, so I think with that, we come to the end of this session. I really hope that I was able to make myself clear because I had a very short time and a lot of things to cover. But yes, I think with that, we come to an end. I'm most happy to answer any questions that you may have.
We have a couple of questions, Miss Hima, and I'll take up first Vanshika's question. What if there are less than 10 women in a company? Who will the woman go to?
Yeah, so like I said, if there are less than 10 people, then instead of the internal committee, the complaint will go to the local committee. The local committee is headed by the district officer of a district. Okay, so then it does not come under any organization. It is handled by the district officer.
Okay.
Because when there are less than 10 women, then there, as per law, the employer does not mandatorily have to have an internal complaint committee. That's why.
She further asks if a person is being harassed in a secondary manner, like you have said, that where a person is not getting direct updates about meetings in a secondary manner, not is the person is being turned down. That does that still qualify for being complained against? If so, then
Of
how and where?
course, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. One very important thing is evidence gathering. So if you've been left out of meetings but you know that a meeting has taken place, you can collect evidence of such meetings. Say that there was a conference on such and such a day. I don't have a mail. I haven't been told. I haven't been invited. So collect all that evidence, and of course, it qualifies for sexual harassment. And if it is, um, after maybe some kind of sexual overtures have already been made to you, you can club the two together and put that to the internal committee. But like I said, please follow the timelines. It's very, very important. Please remember, within 90 days, the complaint has to be made. Within a week, the respondent has to know. Within 90 days, the investigation has to be completed. And once the recommendations are given out, you have 90 days again to appeal against that. If you're not happy with that, you can go and file an FIR at the police station, and the company has to support you and help you with all of that.
Soumya is asking, can you please describe some sort of proofs required?
Please describe.
Proofs, like evidence.
So see, evidences can be WhatsApp messages, they can be emails, it can be witnesses. For instance, like what I'm talking about, the official dinner in a restaurant. There were so many witnesses to that, because this guy said things in front of a lot of people. So you have to then, the IC has to make an investigation, has to meet those people. So three things, basically it can be phone, WhatsApp messages, emails, and witnesses. And if you're talking about the secondary thing, like she's talking about, where you've not been invited for meetings for which you should rightfully be there, then you'll have to collect data of those conferences and meetings from other people who attended it. So the minute you know about it, you have to start collecting that evidence. It has to be documented evidence of any form. It could be on a WhatsApp, it could be on a phone, it could be on an email, or it could be eyewitness.
Okay. There's another question by Vanshika. If aren't the internal committee members employees of the company, what if most of them are friends with the boss who sexually harasses the employee? How and where can we find help?
Yeah.
And prove the culpability?
So yes, Akshita, that can happen sometimes, but it's quite a fair process because, like I said, the internal committee has different people. All right. And in a big organization, all of them need not be the friends of the person who is doing this. Also, there is an external member. So every internal committee has to have an external member from an NGO or a lawyer or somebody who knows about sexual harassment. So that person is definitely not going to be part of the internal team.
So we'll give an unbiased opinion.
Sorry?
So the third party will have an unbiased opinion.
Absolutely. Every internal committee has an external advisor and it's mandatory. It has to be somebody, a lawyer or somebody from an NGO who has to be part of this. Yeah. So it cannot happen that way.
Parvati and Nikita are asking about any government, help or any helpline for these kind of problems.
So basically the district officer is the government help, right? So, and like I said, you have a couple of options. So one is, step one would be the internal committee, and you need not even go that way. You can directly go to the district officer or you can directly go to the police station. The district officer and the police station is basically government help, right? And what the government has done is, that when you put in your complaint to the IC, to the internal complaint committee, one is that that committee has to deal with it. Secondly, the internal committee of every organization has to compile all the sexual harassment cases in their company and hand it over to the district officer who also goes through it and is monitoring. So there are a lot of sexual harassment cases coming in from a company, then there is case for worry and they will make an inquiry too. So there are a lot of backup plans in place. And of course, like I said, the final thing is you can always file under IPC section 354 ABCD and file an FIR at the police.
So if I'm not satisfied with it, I have a further option to take it.
Yes.
So that is
that can also be your first option. I mean, what kind of action you take is totally up to you. But a lot of times people like to do it internally, and an internal committee is a mandated part of for every organization. So there's no getting away from that.
So to that, Vanshika is saying that, what if the majority vote is of the internal committee? So what difference will an external member make?
I'm sorry, Sneha, I can't hear you. Can you repeat that?
So to add it to that, we can go to the external member, the third party who is part of the internal committee and who will have an unbiased answer for our complaint. But what if the entire judgment is biased and based on the maximum number of votes?
It can happen. Of course, that can happen. But like I said, you have another 90 days to appeal. And when you appeal, there might have to be different members on the team. All right. There might have to be a different person who would have to deal with that. So if you're not happy with that judgment, you have the option of appeal. You're not happy with that, you can take the whole case to the district officer and the local committee. The local committee has nothing to do with the internal organization of a company. So theirs is going to be a totally unbiased investigation. And if you're still not happy with that, you can file an FIR in a court and go through the IPC section. Okay, so there are a lot of options available. Of course, it will be time consuming.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Hima. And I cannot thank you enough. That was a very enlightening session, even for me. I learned so much about the history.
My pleasure, absolutely.
About the history, the law, the mandatory requirements at the workplace, the penalty, the clarity on POSH and FIR, what's required to file a complaint, the evidence that I need to collect, and what is the kind of committees that needs to be in place for my safety. I'm sure all the attendees here today will benefit by being more aware of their own personal safety. If you all agree with me, please leave your feedbacks on the chat box. We'd be really looking forward. How did you like the workshop, and what was the workshop helpful for you? Because this was extremely enlightening even for me. Thank you so much, Ms. Hima, for joining us and enlightening.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. So thanks, Utkarsha, and anybody who wants to contact me, you're free to take my email ID and contact from Sneha or Aarti. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Like I said, this is something that's very close to my heart, and I want everybody to have the benefit of my experience and knowledge on the same. Good luck to all of you. Take care. Be safe. Please feel free to reach out to me. Once again, FICCI FLO, thank you so much for having me here. It's been a real privilege, and I was more than happy to be able to have this session for all of our participants today. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, all. Thank you very much.
So much. Thank you all for joining.
Bye.
Aarti, are you there? Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Nandini. Thank you, Anvesha. We'll take your leave now. I will end up the workshop. Thank you for joining.